location of North Inwood. And now on to our main attraction, a history of Inwood Hill Park, right outside. Thank you, iMovie. So the park that's right outside the window of the cafe here, it's as old as time itself, but we're going to break it down into several periods, starting with the native or prehistory of Inwood Hill, when the Lenape lived there. Then it became a colonial village and Revolutionary War outpost. Later on, it became home to the merchant class, very wealthy people that ran estates up on the hill. And when they left, it was taken over by institutions and asylums, very creepy places. And finally, in 1926, Inwood Hill Park opened to the public, and we're here nearly a century later. So the Lenape, this was a seasonal camp for them, and these are the caves that are just out of the park. These are a 5-minute walk from here. And this is a sketch from 1923 from Commissioner Bolton. This is a Reginald Bolton book, and you can see how they haven't changed at all. Great. And this is kind of an imagining of what the park would have been like before development. And this is from Eric Sanderson's Manhattan. Human activity has been present in Inwood Hill Park from the prehistoric times. Through the 17th century, Native Americans, known as the Lenape, or the Delaware, inhabited the area. There is evidence of a main encampment along the eastern edge of the park. The Lenape relied on both the Hudson and Harlem rivers as sources of food. Artifacts and the remains of old campfires were found in Inwood's rock shelters, suggesting their use for shelter and temporary living quarters. And again, these are Eric Sanderson's words. The first New Yorkers to label them with a term they would not recognize were the Lenape, also known as the Lenape, or Muncie, and later as the Delaware. They were called by their peers in the regions the Ancient Ones, respected as the oldest of the northeastern Algonquin culture. They were hunters and gatherers. If this looks familiar, oops, how do I go back? If this looks familiar, it's because over by the Nature Center, they made a recreation of this with Clark, and it's been there for about 15 years. It's holding up pretty well. They were hunters and gatherers, hunting with bows and arrow and spear, and undoubtedly intimately familiar with the fruits, berries, leaves, and nuts of the region. And I love this amulet. This was found hundreds of feet from where we're sitting now. They were also great fisher folk, especially during the spring runs of androgynous fish, and relied heavily on the abundant shellfish resources, especially oysters, clams. You still find oyster shells up in the hill of the region, with the result that shell bins, large piles of discarded shells, are found everywhere where the Lenape were once found. However, the Lenape of New York also knew horticulture based on Mesoamerican crops, corn, beans, squash, traded up from Mexico, though how much they depended on these crops is a matter of debate. And so this is a model of, this is 100 years old, but it's from the Museum of the American Indian, and it shows, how the caves might have been used. And if anybody's been up there, they're not really caves. They're just rocks that have tumbled onto one another, forming, just very shallow shelters. But you pull an animal skin out of the side of it like a tarp, and they become useful. And one of the reasons why this was a nice place, you had the two rivers coming together. You had a hill that sheltered you from the elements. There was also a cold spring. And this is a photo of the cold spring in 1897 by James Rule Smith. He rode around in the 1890s with a box camera on a bicycle, taking photographs and getting descriptions of all the wells and springs before they disappeared. This is a 1916 sketch, Herb Roth from the Pittsburgh Press, and it shows a woman, she's getting a drink from the cold spring. And a gentleman named Pop Seeley, that might even be him sitting right there. He had a cabin right over by where the plaque is on the boulder for Shirakapak. And he fixed boats, he repaired boats, he sold bait, but he also sold beverages. He sold beer and sodas. There's his cabin. This was all filled in with landfill, that we'll get to later, where the Gaelic Field is today. But there was a marina in there. And you can see even in this postcard, they're calling it the Cold Spring. So this would have been Cold Spring Hill before it was Inwood Hill. But Pop Seeley, because the free water was interfering with his beer and soda sales, plugged up the well. He poured cement into it. And the whole neighborhood was furious. And he died several years later in like a hot dog cart on Broadway. And you can see that this could have been named the Cold Spring Road Cafe. It was before it was Indian Road. It was the Cold Spring Road. And there the two of them are together on a 1916 map. And recently, in recent years, some local activists have gotten together and dug out what they believe is the old Cold Spring, and it flows today. And there's some birds bathing in the water out there. So archaeological discoveries. Near the turn of the century, this neighborhood starts getting developed. The subway's coming up. Everything's under construction. And a group of guys who are interested in archaeology, they're amateurs, come up here and just start following construction crews around. And they start digging up all kinds of stuff, both on Broadway, go 7th Street, but also up in the park. And a lot of what they found is, it was either Native American artifacts or stuff from the Revolutionary War. That's what they were interested in. One of them was named Reginald Bolton. And he was a map maker. A lot of these maps are his. But so there's the old Cold Spring. It's called the Spouting Spring here. So where are we? We're somewhere, way up in here. But you walk down, you go up the path, you pass the rock shelters, you keep going up, and you hit the glacial potholes. And a lot of what they found was the shell bins. And they would find other things buried within the shell bins, remains of old meals and whatnot. But the Lenape were very good about burying their trash, keeping the place clean. Stewards of the earth. And so shell bins were just gold mines for these archaeologists. So they developed a tool called a sounding rod, and you can see it there. And it was really just a rod. It was a metal rod, and they would tap it down into the earth. And if they got the tap back from the shells, they knew that was a good place to dig. So there's Bolton, Reginald Bolton, and William Calver, the two of them for 1880s, 1890s through well into the turn of the century were up here just about every weekend. And his cane actually doubled as a sounding rod. It's cool, there's a sounding rod inside that cane. There they are looking into a shell mitten. And it became a neighborhood activity. Out here you have a police officer looking on, little kids, and as time went on, you see more and more children in the photographs. And it was mainly because kids didn't have anything to do. There were no playgrounds, there were no organized activities, and these guys would dig up skulls sometimes. Case in point. So that's a skeleton there, and that is that's on Cooper, a couple blocks from here. This is another shell mitten, and I don't know if you can make it out, but there's a duck sitting up there. I think these are a couple of pigeons next to it. And various tools that Lenape would have used. These are hammer stones and some kind of rubbing stone. Bits of pottery. Skeletons galore, both from the Native American times and the Revolutionary War, and then colonial burials as well. And there's shells in there. And one of the theories that they put the shells in with the graves, and they bury their animals too. If they had a pet dog and the dog died, they would bury the animal. They bury the dog. Then scavenging animals couldn't dig through the layers of shells. And this is a tool for hurling a spear. This is kind of a description of how it works. This is unearthing Gotham. Amulets. These look like scraping stones. And pottery. Some of the pottery was nearly intact. They found one beautiful piece of intact pottery. I think that's it there. Just buried the side of an embankment. And it had been what they called killed. They poked a hole in the bottom of it and buried it. It was never to be used again. Seaman Avenue. We all know what these are, arrowheads. The Isham family had a nice collection of arrowheads too. So 1609, Henry Hudson arrives, and he sails up, I don't even know what they would have called it, the North River at that point. And he has an encounter with the Lenape. And one of the shipmates, according to a journal kept by shipmate Robert Jouet, Hudson and his crew on the Half Moon sailed into the New York Harbor on September 11th, 1609. From there they sailed north up the Hudson River, didn't yet bear his name of course, stopping briefly in the cove created by the Spite and Dibble. September 1609. This morning, at our first anchorage in the river, 28 canoes full of men, women, and children came to us, but we saw their intent of treachery, and would not allow any of them to come aboard. They brought with them oysters and beans, some of which we bought. They were coming to trade. October, I think soured fast. This afternoon, one canoe kept hanging under our stern with one man in it. Our master's mate shot at him and struck him in the breast and killed him, whereupon all the rest fled away. Yet they manned another canoe with 9 or 10 men, which came to meet us. So I shot and killed one of them. Then one of our men, with their muskets, killed 3 or 4 more. So first contact, it didn't go well. Created distrust. 1626, Peter Benoit allegedly purchases the island of Manhattan from the Lenape for a handful of trinkets. Today a bronze plaque affixed to a large rock marks the site of the transaction. It's just right at the edge of the field there, out the window. 1715, this is a quote from Reginald Bolton, the last Native Americans to inhabit Inwood Hill were induced to abandon the place. And they went up further out west, towns like Muncie or Lenape names. So 1776 through 1783. This is Fort Cock Hill, which is on the top of Inwood Hill. And lately the Parks Department has put signage up there so you can find it. British and Hessian troops, Hessians were mercenaries, occupied Inwood Hill during the Revolutionary War. Today, all that remains of Cock Hill is a rocky outcropping of the north summit of the ridge, where cannon were once trained to the north and the east. So there's a map of the area. So let's figure out where we are. We're somewhere down in here, and Cock Hill is right directly in front of us at the top of the hill. And when you hear Inwood is a primeval forest, most of it was clear cut during the Revolutionary War. And you can see that it's the diminutive trees for fortifications and firewood. This is another map of the area. So Hessians, and if these look familiar, there's a Hessian hut reconstructed behind the Dykeman Farmhouse Museum down on 204th and Broadway. And so these are huts. They would dig them into the side of the hill. And they found all kinds of stuff, in and around these huts. I think, 93 of them were discovered near Payson Avenue by Bolton and those other archaeologists. But they would find all kinds of artifacts. Little dye. They'd take musket balls and hammer them into squares and gamble with them. A lot of bottles for drinking. Those are all probably casks of sherry or something. Not real practical uniforms for the inland winters. It must have been brutally cold up there. Fun fact, the Headless Horseman was a Hessian. We break this slide out at Halloween. So more archaeological discoveries. You see again all the children are there. Now pets have started showing up on the scene. Two cups. These kids are kind of creepy. They're like right out of The Shining. She is dressed up for the occasion. So relics, we got a canteen, some bayonets, a 10 cup. And the Dykeman House has a relic room where some of these artifacts can be seen today. Okay, so there's Calver and Bolton on the left, and right there is the infamous sounding rod. They just figured this stuff out on their own. And there they are reconstructing the Hessian hut that faces behind the Dykeman House.
That's a great picture.
That's a great photo. There it is today. Before and after. And I think the roof timbers are replaced periodically, correct, Don?
Last time in the 60s.
Last time it was repaired was in the 60s. So what's up left? So here's a map of Inwood Hill Park from the 1930s. So we are down here somewhere. You go in, up the path to the caves, and that area's called the Clove. That building with the three sections is the House of Mercy. That was an asylum. We'll get to that later. So the Bolton Road. You might have been up in the park and seen the Upper Bolton Road, the Lower Bolton Road. What in the world is the Bolton Road? So here's the Bolton Road. So John and Curtis Bolton, they bought some real estate up here, up in the park. The family had been in the cotton and shipping business. They were privateers, but privateers had hurt their business down south. So John and Curtis moved to New York City. In 1817, the Boltons purchased a tract of land from the heirs of Jan Nagel. John Bolton became alderman of the 9th Ward. In 1834, he was one of the committee of the board that had to report on the difficulties arising as to the property lines due to the laying out of the city plan on its present rectangular lines. So imagine carving a street grid up in Inwood Hill. It's nearly impossible. But it appears on maps. Curtis Bolton became the head of the firm of Bolton, Fox, and Livingston, which owned a fleet of clipper ships known as the Union Line, sailing between New York and Le Havre. He was treasurer of the New York Institute for the Blind and director of the Institute for the Deaf and Dumb, which was, I think, just south of us. There's their old grist mill. And so they laid out the roads, and we're planning on pursuing a business up here, but for one reason or another, it didn't work out. They sold the property. And Samuel Thompson moved in. And he was an interesting character. He did a lot for this neighborhood. He built the local church. He contributed to the schools. So in 1814, builder Samuel Thompson purchases 80-odd acres of land, comprising the bulk of what we now know as Inwood Hill. And Thompson names the site Mount Washington. It didn't really have a proper name. A lot of people call it the Tubby Hook area or the Cold Spring area. We call it Mount Washington. He was enamored by our first president. The greater region was more commonly known as Tubby Hook. It's the Tubby Hook Cafe, the Tubby Hook Tavern. So there's the happy couple.
Formally.
And we have a description. And this is, I believe, from a nephew who visited the estate in 1844. And he writes, as we entered his gate, And he would have been close to the ridge, up where the overlook is, with the wrought iron railing where you get the beautiful view of the Palisades. As we entered his gate at the road, we seemed to leave the world behind us, as it was 1/2 mile through the primeval forest to his residence. As we wound slowly up the hill, the view at the top, down over the New York Bay and Staten Island, and up the river to the highlands of the Hudson, amply repaid the fatigue of climbing. I was cordially received by the family and felt at home at once and ever afterwards. In the morning I rose early and rambled through the woods and in the lovely garden. As I passed an open window, I saw Mr. Thompson with his large Bible in his hands and his face beaming with delight as he drank in the promises and rested on the Word of God. So that's what his house looked like. And actually, this was the second house. They were putting the finishing touches on the first house when I think it was a welder or something, a carpenter, left a smudge pot burning while he had lunch and burned down the house. And they had to rebuild it. But there's a building down on 13th Street, West 13th Street, that's nearly identical to the old Thompson estate.
Wow.
And again, he opened the neighborhood's first church, Mount Washington Church, in 1844. That would have sat right where the Dyckman Street A train station is today, near the Ring Guard. And it was relocated to Vermillion. I think in the 1920s or 30s. It's a completely different structure now. Presbytery.
Yeah.
Railroad, and this is important. This really helped the neighborhood develop. 1848, railroad bridge is built over the Spike Bible, and you can see that it really hasn't changed. This is an 1899 photograph. It looks the same today. Members of the downtown merchant class began to build summer residences in the newly accessible area, because then it connected to the trains that went north. So trains, rather than routing down the Harlem River, they could go directly down the Hudson, and it became a commuter train if you wanted to get off at Tubby Hook at Dyckman Street. And so if you were wealthy, you built a house up here. And you spent many of your summers up here when it was sweltering and the sea was written downtown. Wash your hands. Okay, so this is the railroad bridge in 1900. This is one of Don's photographs. This is very nice. So the channel right in front of us out the window where the Columbia Sea Rock is known as the Spite Idle. And the Spite Idle started out as this meandering creek that went kind of, it wasn't a straight line. And in the middle of the creek was the peninsula, near where the Columbia Sea is today, and it went out towards where the Nature Center is. So the Nature Center would be here. So when they straightened it out, they just sliced right through here. But on that peninsula was the Johnson Iron Works. And the Johnson Iron Works, I'm trying to remember the year they founded, but let's say the 1850s, and they started out selling milk cans and stoves, but when the Civil War came around, West Point was right up the river, and a General Delafield said, "Can you make cannons?" And they kind of bluffed. They said, "Sure, we can make cannons, but making a cannon is a lot different than making a milk cannon." And by some miracle, they were successful. Not one of the cannons misfired, and from there on out, they were in the munitions business. And so at any given time, there were 1,200 men working 12-hour shifts at this plant, 24 hours a day. Oh yeah, look at that. So this is, right up here is the old Seaman estate. And so that's where Park Terrace Gardens is now. So we would be, somewhere down here? And these are the employees of the Johnson Iron Works. Keep in mind, a photograph back then you had to stay really still for, so those blurs are horses. (1863). So we're working our way forward in time here. The name Inwood first appears on the developer's map. Don found this down at the Hall of Records. What do you call it? The
City Register's Office.
City Register's Office. He dug through there and found this thing. So that's the first time Inwood appears on map anywhere. 1864, the name of the neighborhood officially changes. We go from Tubby Hook to Inwood. The name Tubby Hook lingers on, though. This is an 1866 broadside for a real estate auction. And now moving on to the merchant class. So we discussed the railroad coming in, making the neighborhood accessible. And so think of this as the Hamptons or something. It was some place where it was sparsely populated, a beautiful hill, beautiful views, and property that was practically free. So here's some of these names that you'll recognize. James McCreery, he was a dry goods merchant. He had what would imagine the box stores today. That was kind of what he was a forerunner of. Isidore Straus, his company became Macy's. He would die in the Titanic. Elisha Brooks, he was one of the Brooks brothers. Frederick Talcott, they don't talk about him much anymore, but he was the Cotton King of New York. And Joseph Kepler, he read Puck magazine. He was an illustrator, political satirist. He would have had a great time in this era. So we were talking about how it would be difficult to cut roads through Inwood Hill, but they did do a period of map. This is 1879, and this is a developer's map. And there's more family names you'll recognize up there: the Riggs family. The Dickensians had some property up here as well. So James McCreery, his wife's name was Fanny. Lived up on the hill with his children, James, Charles, Andrew, Robert, William, and Mary. Died in 1900. These are some old McCreery ads. And this was a new idea, places where you could just go and just buy all kinds of bolts of fabric, ready-made clothes, you name it. Things being shipped from Europe. Furs. Corsets. And this is their house. You might have been expecting something bigger and grander, but this would have been a large home at the time. Still standing in 1926. That's the same year that the park opened. So when the park opened, there were still old homes up there. Isidore Straus, his company became Macy's. A slightly happier couple, I don't know. But there they are. Isidore and Ida Straus. There's the Straus home. And this was probably taken long after they moved out. It looks fairly overgrown. And from what I understand, Ida never liked it up here. She thought the neighborhood was kind of creepy. They did. Elijah Brooks. So there's Elijah there. And we have a description of his estate as well. This is from 1869 from the New York Herald. The house stands back from the water about 200 feet and is a large stuccoed mansion, appearing like brown stone, in the fine order and worthy of occupancy by the first lord of the soil. Mr. Brooks' place is one of the finest on the Hudson. The structure alone, without the elegant grounds, would be a fit abode for kings. Spruces, pines, hemlocks, and all species of sassafras and maple abound through the entire area. The drive is lined by flower lots, sylvan glades, and verdant lawns. The plants are especially luxuriant, having all the colors of the spectrum, and the sweetness of the tropical spring. The hawthorn peach trees bore some 1,200 peaches at the earliest part of June, and the strawberry pit was very prolific. The grapery produced a fine crop, and some 500 pounds of large and beautiful clusters still hang on the vines. Frederick Talcott, again, he was the Cotton King. Cotton was a huge commodity. There's the New York Cotton Exchange, 1883. And from the same article from 1869, the mansion and grounds of Mr. F.L. Talcott, a rich and retired cotton merchant who has made his mark in the great cotton transactions of his time, an old knickerbocker and genial and accomplished gentleman, are the first that are to be seen on entering the mountain road. Mr. Talcott has 4 acres with a front of 1,000 feet, on the mountain road extending back to the Dykeman estate in the rear. The area is terraced from the road and curves away to the highest point and an elevated mound planted with flowers, aviaries, rookeries, glens, grounds for all kinds of sport make up a part of the design. And the old preserved trees, such as the pine, the Norwegian maple, the dogwood, and the lofty chestnut, all grown to admirable heights. But the main feature of Mr. Talcott's place is undoubtedly his house, now nearly completed, a model English baronial hall built by an English architect. The structure is composed entirely of brick and stone, there being no lath or plaster or stucco work used at all. The foundations are solid, the walls 18 inches thick, and the house is 3 stories high, with cellars and an observatory. The parlors are very commodious, with 16-foot ceilings, and all the rooms in the house are elegantly painted in colors, the blue room, the red room, and others being finished regardless of cost. Wow, I think he had something to do with the writing of this. Or his decorator. Joseph Kepler, this guy's fun. He was just a great cartoonist. And his son would wind up taking over the magazine. This is the Kepler home. This is fun. This is a self-portrait. There he is passed out in a hammock, surrounded by all his characters. And his son became very involved with Native Americans and preserving their cultures and making sure that various artifacts wound up in museums. And this photograph was actually taken on Inwood Hill. And this is what is this? This is a cynical lacrosse team. And Kepler, the son, is hosting. And of the Kepler collection, which was housed in the Kepler home on Inwood Hill. And it all wound up at the Museum of the Native American. One of the most valuable private collections of Indian relics in the country is owned by Joseph Kepler of Puck. Mr. Kepler is a cartoonist, as his father was before him. He became greatly interested in Indians at the age when boys usually think that the highest ambition in life is to become an Indian scout. And though his ambitions have changed, his interest in Indians has grown stronger. Mr. Kepler is an Indian chief by election. This is true. His house at Inwood is filled with Indian relics, among them being several very valuable wampum belts. And I wish this was a color photograph, because this is bound to be just amazing. But this is the interior of the Kepler house when the son was living there.
Wow.
Okay, so the railroads that made it possible for all these wealthy people to have nice homes up there is rerouted. In 1871, it stops going up and down the Hudson and goes down the Harlem River, making the neighborhood completely inaccessible, unless you had a horse and were willing to just trudge through the mud downtown, which most people weren't. So a lot of the people just abandoned their homes. So train service is rerouted around the Spike Drive and down the Harlem line, leaving property owners cut off from downtown Manhattan. Members of New York's merchant class simply abandoned their summer residences. In the absence of wealthy residents, Inwood Hill was given over to institutions and asylums. For decades, it remained a bleak and desolate place of incarceration and suffering. Fun fact. Many of the old homes had wells on their site, and if you go up there, really poke around, we did this with Betty Lee a couple of years ago, you can find the old wells. And you wouldn't think that water could be found that high up on the hill, but it can be. Case in point? Yeah, that's me in that well. Thank you, Don, for this wonderful photo. It's a classic.
I'm not going down.
And I believe the Parks Department has since filled this one in. So, back to the institutions. Can't escape them. This is the House of Mercy. And when you look at the size of this place, there's a church in Harlem that was built by, I think the guy's name was James Congdon, the architect. It's very similar to this one. I think it's, I can't remember what the name of the church is. But it's huge, and it's brick, and there's not a trace of it up there today.
What happened to the foundations of those things?
From what I understand, Robert Moses would have work crews just dig holes, they bulldoze stuff in, and I imagine a lot of these bricks were repurposed. I mean, they were building materials.
Because you never see anything
No, you find some bricks up there from time to time,
But you
but
don't see those foundations.
you would expect to find more. You really don't. This was a postcard.
Wish you were here.
Yeah, wish you were here, dear mom. This is kind of faint, but there it is. It's always easy to spot on a map because it's got 3 wings. This was from some sort of a leaflet describing the House of Mercy, but one of the wings was the Saint Saviour's Sanatorium. So it was divided into 3 wings really. One was for children, and really the other 2 were for women with money and without money. But they would take care of women who were addicted to drugs or opium, and it was they were shut down eventually, and they were just horrible abuses. They would shave people's heads, put them on molasses bread diets. Men could have their wives incarcerated for up to 3 years just on the recommendation of a doctor. So you find your wife dancing at Coney Island with a stranger, you can have her locked up. Escapes were common. That was a true case. And when you escaped, you usually broke a leg or a limb, and they'd find you, somewhere out in the woods the next morning. Head shaved to punish. Sisters are never cruel. Girl was lying. Ironically, when it closed its doors in the late 19 teens, it was taken over by the Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Children. He used it as a temporary home until it was eventually torn down. So let's say food, flowers, and kind treatment bring happiness to the rescued children of Inwood. Classrooms. These are just screenshots from it was an annual report for the society that was put on Google years ago and has since been removed. I'm hoping to get better photographs one day. So then there was the House of Rest. There were 3 asylums up on Inwood Hill. One for tuberculosis patients, which is the House of Rest, which we're looking at. The House of Mercy, and then another one for girls, maybe pregnant young women, the Magdalene Asylum. But this is the House of Rest, and it was for tuberculosis patients. You went here to die. And people in the neighborhood, were not crazy about this in their backyard. So in case there's any confusion, consumption is tuberculosis, because the disease would literally consume you. You would waste away before somebody's eyes. Various famous people who succumbed to consumption. So the handy map again. So let's see. There's the House of Mercy. Where are you? It's somewhere up here. There it is. That's it. That's the House of Rest. And we're going to get to the Magdalene Asylum in a minute, but it's over here. So yeah, it went from having really wealthy, cool people with butlers, and carriages and stuff to this. And people down below in the valley where we are, don't go up there. That's what you tell your kids. So a home for incurable consumptive established on Inwood Hill, 1902. And this is an interesting quote. I can see people going crazy with this on Facebook today. Residents of the upper part of Washington Heights and all of the Inwood section are aroused over the proposition to locate consumptives near them. They assert that the health of their families will be endangered, and a determined fight is to be made to prevent the Board of Health from issuing a permit for the opening of the establishment. Sounds reasonable. This is the motto of the House of Rest. No patient is ever sent away from this hospital by reason of the advanced condition of his or her ailment. Well, that's reassuring. Okay, and then we also, just to the south of the House of Rest, had the Magdalen home. And the Magdalen home was built to look like a French chateau. And it overlooked Tubby Hook, where La Marina is, the Canoe Club are, just where Dickensian Street hits the Hudson River. But this side of the railroad track, so it's up on the hill. Map illustrates it. So there it is. So there's no viaduct here that the train travels over. These are the gates. It's like a pagoda or something. You're going into a pagoda. It doesn't really fit the French chateau, but they were having fun, I guess. W.W. Bosworth and F.W. Bosworth Architects. Inwood, New York. So, this is designed to make it fairly escape-proof if you're on one of the top floors. And through the years, girls would die and break limbs, climbing out of windows and sheets, diving through laundry chutes. And again, this was mainly for young women who were either pregnant or had babies. And your family could send you there, the courts could send you there. New York Daily Tribune, looks very civilized in there. Everybody's on the best behavior. See Lower Bolton Road? Lots of riots. You go back and look at the newspaper articles for this place, and just every 6 months there's a riot. Kept the local police busy. And a lot of deaths. Mainly during escapes. Odd. A Christmas castle at Inwood Hill, Hudson. That's not at all a Christmas castle. And this will lead up to why they were shut down. They were doing experiments on the girls. They were injecting them with mercury, and they started winding up in local hospitals. Whether the poison was swallowed accidentally or whether the girls joined in a suicide pact was left unexplained by hospital authorities, who, it was said, had heard the story from the superintendent. This wasn't at all true. They were trying to cure syphilis. And so they were shut down. There was a huge public outcry, and for a while, it housed the Jewish Memorial Hospital, which was later relocated on Broadway, I think about 191st Street. And it wasn't an ideal setup for a hospital. Yeah, can you imagine? So then we'll pop back again. 1883 is where we are, and Inwood is set to host the World's Fair. The World's Fair, you say? Yes, the World's Fair. General U.S. Grant, he was, Civil War was over, he was out of a job, he had very powerful friends, but no money of his own. And so they gave him this gig, and said, you're gonna, after Central Park said that they weren't interested in having the World's Fair, which just trashed the place. Inwood seemed like a pretty good area. And locals were thrilled at the prospect because it would improve the infrastructure up here. Sewer lines, water lines would be laid out. But the red rings, as you can see, were all drawn up. They had all kinds of plans for it, but they never raised any money. And Grant quit the Fair Commission in disgust, and the World's Fair of 1883 never happened. 1890. And every now and then this turns into kind of a photo album. I know when a photo is taken, so we can watch the progression of the park. But out in front of us, that soccer field you see there, people call it the Gaelic field, that had been water. Water came in from the Spite and all up the way up to the tree line. And in later decades, that was filled in with landfill that became the soccer field that we have today. And I love this photo. It's a guy, and I don't know if that's a black lab, but it's a big black dog, and he's fishing, and it's, the water's clear as glass. 1891, Alexander Crawford Chenoweth. Now, he was an engineer. He helped build the Croton Aqueduct, and he lived up on Inwood Hill. He discovers, but discovers quotes as well, the Native American caves, the rock shelters, not far from his Inwood home. Exploration of the caves unearths countless Native American artifacts. 1895, Andrew Haswell Green, the father of Greater New York, makes a public plea that Inwood Hill should be acquired by the city for use as a park. And they discuss this for quite some time. Every so often the subject comes up again in the news. And really, most of the property's been abandoned anyway. The institutions are closed. The wealthy people, maybe they still own the land. They're not interested in it anymore. Some of it can conceivably be taken through condemnation. 1895, the Army Corps of Engineers. They take that little creek and they widen it and they dredge it and they make it possible for larger ships to make it between the Harlem and the Hudson Rivers. But they leave the curve there because the ironworks, they're making weapons of war. They are needed for our military efforts. And so that stays. And the ship captains couldn't stand this thing because they said it was just treacherous. Eventually they'll blast straight through, which is what it looks like today. 1900. Now this is a photo of the tulip tree. If you've been down to the Shirakapak Rock, you've read the story about the exchange of the trinkets for the land. But it also says that it was the site of a great tulip tree. And this tulip tree sat there for, I think it was about 275 years. And it was the most famous tree in New York. Poems were written about the tulip tree, bad poems. O tulip tree, what changes time hath wrought, what scenes have passed beneath thy bough, what fleeting age hath bought. Augustus Post, who was also a pilot. He was an early daredevil. 1900, we have a bathing beach on Dyckman Street. This is right where La Marina is. And right next to it is the sewer outflow for Dyckman Street. So I don't know which way the river flows. These people didn't seem to care. The eel fishermen said it improved their fishing net. Dyckman Street, 1902. So all parked today, but you can see how many houses there are. So this is Payson Avenue. We're working our way west on Dyckman Street down towards the Hudson River. So there's the, and we know it's about 1902 because there's the Magdalene Asylum under construction. And so these are all wood frame houses up here. There's roads going up into the park. What is the park today? I believe you can see the spire of the House of Mercy somewhere in here. I've lost it. But there's a lot of activity, a lot of private ownership up there. 1904, something else that never comes to fruition, Wonderland. It's going to be the Coney Island of northern Manhattan, and it's going to be right out our window to the north. All this area that's now the Columbia Athletic Complex is going to be a giant amusement park. And all kinds of renderings were done. They were going to have a pagoda garden, a ballroom, a casino, and this guy, Andrew Kobe, turns out he's the one, C-O-B-E, who's raising all the money. He's just a huckster, and it never happens. And George Baker buys the property, and it becomes Baker Field and the rest of the Columbia complex. But as late as 1905, they're still saying it's going to open on June 1st. But before they can build Baker Field, they have to get rid of the last pig in Manhattan. And this is a photograph by Reginald Bolton, and it's the current site of Baker Field. Yeah, biggie. So this is a 1904. This is a postcard. This is a Singer sewing machine postcard. And that is so it's starting to look kind of like it's recognizable. The subway line is starting to be built. It hasn't connected to the bridge yet because they put the wrong type of bridge in just several years before the subway was built. They had to swap that out with a new bridge. But it got recycled. They made it the University Heights Bridge. I mean, why waste a perfectly good bridge? 1912, Isham Park opens. And that's the Broadway entrance to Isham Park. There's buildings over here now, but you probably recognize walking up here. It was a line of elms. Sometimes you take the stairs up this way. At least I do. Also, 1912 is a 1912 photograph anyway, but for a couple of years, this is actually 2 dates on there anywhere. Somewhere right in here. 1909 through 1912, Hollywood, which is not on the map yet. the film industry is downtown. They're doing stuff inside of buildings. So for the exterior shots, the westerns especially, they would come up here because you could ride a horse on Inwood Hill, and you might as well be out west. It would pretty quickly move to Fort Lee, the industry, and then just as soon to Hollywood. But for a couple of years, a lot of silent films were made up. Hundreds of silent movies were made up here. But based on the nature of the film stock, none of them survived, sadly. 1914, they proposed opening an open-air theater on the side of Inwood Hill, facing us right out the window, like an amphitheater. Think Central Park Summer Stage on a grander scale, with bleachers lining the hill, creating a Coliseum-like view. That's kind of crazy. 1914 photograph. So the Dyckman Street Ferry will open the following year, but until the big ferry takes off, these little boats, these little boathouses which just line the Hudson River and get people back and forth between here and New Jersey, because there was no George Washington Bridge. 1915, the Dyckman Street Ferry at the southern end of Inwood Hill Park opens. It opens up the park to people from other states even. There's the ferry going back and forth. Want to see it in motion? We can do that. Look at this. Yay. These are from a home movie shot in the 1930s by the Roberts family. Richard Roberts and his family lived in what was called Cox's Boathouse on Tubby Hook. Pretty amazing. This is one of Don's photographs. So actually, the Ishams would have owned this property. The sign is saying to keep off the Ishams property, but it looks like it's saying keep out of Inwood Hill Park, which really theoretically was private property as well, for the most part. But we're going to get down in there soon. But you can see it as just a flourishing marine community happening down in there. 1915, the mission of the Redeemer Church begins services inside the current Inwood Hill Park near the intersection of Seaman and Isham Street. In 1927, it's right over where the tennis courts are. In 1927, the church merges with the Holy Trinity Episcopal Church, currently located, or partially located now, on 20 Cumming Street. Yeah, part of that church is part of that property is being leveled. What's the condominiums I think are going in? This is Anthony Wheeler and his son, or Ezra. Ezra's the adult, Anthony's the child. And we came into a collection of family photographs, and they were great about posing in front of sites you can still recognize today. So there is Inwood Hill sloping down into the water there. The Henry Hudson Bridge would be right there. And the Johnson Iron Works are still, going full steam right behind them. And he was a postal clerk on the railroad. And there he is again. It looks like maybe there's a tugboat in the background. Little Anthony Wheeler. So, all that construction all over the neighborhood right now, that just sounds so awful. Imagine this thing. It never left the neighborhood. It was there from the 1850s through the 1920s. And it was toxic. May 8th, 1926. Yay, we've got a park. Native Americans are on site to help dedicate the park. And really, from the get-go, from Kepler living up in the park and inviting Native Americans, lacrosse players, to the opening of Inwood Hill Park, and just about every year since, there's been some sort of Native American presence, festival, fair out there. When I moved to the neighborhood, it was called the Shad Fest. Now it's called Drums Along the Hudson. But their presence is always felt in the neighborhood. So this is Inwood Hill Park, officially opened. Native Americans participate in the opening ceremonies attended by more than 1,000 New Yorkers. Newspapers noted that the majority of the spectators were children. All told, the city spent slightly over $5 million on the land acquired from property owners and condemnation proceedings. And this is something they've talked about since 1895. But it's still just a loose assortment of lots. It's not a proper park. 1926, there's the booklet. And they would do these booklets from year to year. They'd have a program and tell you who the speakers were. They're all gathered down to where the Shrockapok Rock is today. It wasn't placed in there until the 1950s, though. This is interesting. They decided that it was so important to educate people on the Native American presence in the park that they built a fake reservation. And they hired Native Americans from various tribes from all over the country to come and work in this park in New York. And they would wear uniforms that seemed period specific. You know, today probably, I don't know how people would receive it, but kids especially loved it. 1927, there's a lot of swimming and a lot of canoeing going on around here. And today the water is probably much cleaner than it was then. But people didn't see the spiritual currents and whatnot, drowning. 1927 to 1931, the George Washington Bridge is constructed. And this brings a lot more people to the area, and it also is the death knell for the Dyckman Street Ferry. Oh, more home movies.
George Washington Bridge, but wasn't finished then. Because they didn't have the roadway bedded yet. You could see that.
So back to the Indian Life Reservation. It was run by the New York City Parks Department in conjunction with the Dyckman Institute. Reginald Bolton was very involved in it. This was a Native American sculptor. I believe he was from South America. Emilio Cabral Diaz. And this was it's carefully disguised. It looks like a tree trunk. But it was incinerated, used for burning trash. There's a sign on the trail leading up to the Indian Life Reservation. Just a forgotten part of the park's history. So, late 1920s, they start doing through various subway digs. Keep in mind that the Dyckman Street, the extension of the A train to 207th Street, that didn't happen until 1926. So they had a lot of dirt, a lot of rocks, a lot of rubble. So this whole area is landfill, where people play soccer today. Huge green fields. You know, if you've been out there, you know you've been there. But this was water. The water used to go right up the railroad tracks. The old tulip tree is starting to die. The Parks Department tree surgeons used cement to repair the damage to the old tulip. According to legend, it was under the tulip that the Native Americans traded the land of Manhattan for a handful of trinkets and guilders. 1931, and this is remarkable that nobody noticed these, or maybe they just weren't worth noticing in most people's minds. The glacial potholes are discovered. And they just could have been, they were just buried under undergrowth. But they were found by an Inwood resident. And if you don't know anything about a glacial pothole, when the glaciers started to melt 10,000 some odd years ago, holes would form and the water would swirl around and just carve out these, they're bowl-like and smooth. They look man-made. Throughout the 1920s and 30s, the various people lived up there. Some of them were squatters, some of them had actual houses. This is a beekeeper. He was Ukrainian. His name was Mike Feslian. And every kid in the neighborhood had a story about this guy. 1933, the Dragon Murder Mystery Case by S.S. Van Dyne's Pulp Fiction was based in Inwood Hill Park. The book is later made into a film. In the book, the park's glacial potholes, which you just saw, turn out to be the entrances to caves inhabited by murderous dragons. It's a terrible, terrible movie. Yeah, we did show it once. Sorry about that. 1933, so we're just the depths of the Great Depression. A boxcar village. You would have been able to see it pretty much from where we're sitting right now, just across this fight and dive hole. And I can't remember the name of the woman who ran the place, but for $5 or $10 a month, you could rent out a boxcar. And I don't think you were allowed to drink because they provided food for single men who were able to work. On the other side of Inwood Hill Park, where the landfill was put to extend the park acreage, squatter colonies, one called Camp Dykeman, also opened. 1934, we're starting to see some infrastructure put in the park. What we know today is the Dykeman Street Comfort Station opens up.
Recreation leader there.
You what?
I was the recreation leader there.
Recreation leader. Well, I was just about to get to recreation. There was a nursery school in there.
Yes.
Mrs. Haggerty?
Mrs. Haggerty.
Mrs. Haggerty.
You got it.
Okay. I went back in time, looked around. Mrs. Haggerty. Hey, this little boy, I just feel every time I see this thing, he should be wearing long pants. He just refused. That is the USS Memphis. Throughout the 30s and leading up to World War II, it was not uncommon for the military, the Navy, to just tuck ships in the Hudson River. It was a nice safe spot. 1934, and I didn't notice it when I first saw this photo, but somebody pointed out the barbed wire at the top of the playground fence.
Whoa.
Just I don't know what there's worth protecting in there. Seems kind of dangerous.
Can't get out.
Summer camp, 1934. They start hosting a summer camp up on top of Inwood Hill. The belief is that you get kids who've never been to camp, never been in the woods, just out to nature. It's not that far away, and so they hosted summer camps up here. 1934, and this is Princess Naomi. We'll get to her in a little bit. But when we talk about the Indian Life Reservation at the Dykeman Institute, she was part of that program. And Don, did you notice that they spelled Bolton's name wrong on this?
Oh, look at that.
Yeah. I mean, he's like the dean of Inwood history, and they get this long talk. That was a long talk. Oh, this is good. This is good.
Up in Inwood Hill Park, going down toward Payson Avenue. Some of them houses are still there, believe it or not. Some of the houses on Payson Avenue, that is, in the park, there's nothing. Now, if you look, you'll see houses. Let me see who's writing all over on this sled here. I think it's Miss Eve. There's an old house up there in the park. You see, it's all gone now. Gone a long time. See the house there? Maybe that was part of the Jewish Memorial Hospital. Used to be there. It was put there in 1905. Then they tore it down in 1932 or 33. I don't know. Not as all the snow at this time. We don't seem to have that kind of snow no more. It's a little friend of mine.
So in the 30s, J.J. Roberts was saying they didn't have the snow like they used to. And this is certainly not a snowy year. Speaking of sledding, 1934, Harry Houdini's nephew, Harry Houdini Hinson, keep in mind Houdini wasn't a real family name, is killed in a sledding accident near his aunt's best place on 67 Payson Avenue. So we had three Houdinis in the neighborhood. We had Bess, Houdini's widow, who lived on Payson Avenue. We had Harry Houdini Hinson, who lived in the neighborhood. And we had Leopold Weiss, who was Houdini's brother, who lived at 57 Park Terrace West. And why they all moved up here after Houdini's death, I have no idea. What drew them to this neighborhood? Because the family apartment had been in Harlem. 1935, and everybody loves a tugboat, right? Starting to look recognizable. Again, the little houseboat colony is still down by the water. 1935. The Parks Department announces the opening of bids for the construction of the Henry Hudson Bridge across the Spike and Dival. Amid fierce local opposition, construction lasts just 1 year, and the project, under the leadership of Robert Moses, comes in under budget. And you'll see initially it was just one tier, one level. Yeah. 1936, it's open for traffic. And how long do construction projects take today? 1936, Fort Tryon Park opens. (1935) Back in Inwood Hill Park, people are bathing. Bad bathers. Yeah, people were not afraid of the water at all. And people were skinny. 1936, engineers make a direct cut through the peninsula that once extended from the cliff today marked by the Columbia Sea. The tip of the former peninsula, now an island, is today home to the Inwood Hill Urban Ecology Center, that little white building out there. So that little island, whatever you want to call it, was the tip of a peninsula that used to touch the Bronx. And this is so washed out you can't see it, but it says on the sign the Hudson River Land Reclamation Committee, and it's just more landfill that they're putting in to extend the acreage of the park. So, this is an easy way to explain where the peninsula was. So the peninsula where the Johnson Iron Works looked like this. Picture that. And when they chopped through it, they just left the tip of it sticking out. So that's what we've got today. A little bit of the Bronx and Manhattan. 1936, Robert Moses evicts all, and this is his words, squatters from the park. Eviction notices are issued to the Inwood Pottery Works, the Dyckman Institute, curator Naomi Kennedy, commonly known as Princess Naomi, and residents of the houseboat colony. All the people that were living there, and had lived there for decades probably, were told to get out, and not slowly, get out now. And especially the Pottery Works, they had a problem there because it takes a lot to pack all that up, look for a new place to go. Princess Naomi, and it was pointed out to me, and it should be pointed out to you, I suppose there is no such thing as an Indian princess. This is her title for herself, what she told people to call her down at Inwood Hill Park. She told people she was Cherokee. She probably was not. She's definitely Native American, but from one of the tribes somewhere in Louisiana, probably near Lafayette, Louisiana, based on census records. She was a show person, and she reveled in the act, I suppose. And kids in the neighborhood, now very old people, remember her walking around the neighborhood in high-heeled shoes and dresses when she wasn't working. Inwood Pottery Works. This was the Voorhees, Amelia Prince Voorhees. Her father, this is a real tangent, had invented possibly the first moving picture camera. But she pulled a little boat into the Spike and Dival sometime near the turn of the century and just never left. And she and her husband ran a pottery works. And a lot of people who did pottery who became famous later on studied under her. She was respected. So this is Robert Moses, a quote from his book Public Works. The hullabaloo about disturbing the princess, the kiln, the old tulip tree, and other flora and fauna was terrific. I mean, he really just did not give a damn. But he built a bridge in under a year. So the houseboat colony gone. June 11th, 1936, the Parks Department announces plans to use landfill to add 24 acres of land to the park in an area now commonly known as the Gaylord Field. The plan coincides with the War Department's decision to straighten the spike gravel. So that's crazy. So they did it. They went and did it. And there's not a tree out there yet. I mean, just picture what's out there today, and then picture this. And then the next photo is from Betty Lee. Thank you, Betty. And it's almost the same angle. And it's probably 5, 6 years later. So look at the little tiny trees that are now great big trees. There's no fence, I've noticed, because people knew not to walk into the water. The benches are there.
Trees and water fountains.
1937. This is just an email I received from somebody. I run a local history website, myinwood.net, and now and then people just write in. And this is a former commissioner of the New York City Department of Records. And he writes, Cole, I have a few photos that my grandfather took at what I suppose was an annual gathering in Inwood Hill Park, circa 1937. They're labeled Princess Naomi, Red Fawn, and Paul Horn, in parentheses Mohawk, signed Brian Anderson. And they're wonderful images. It's Princess Naomi.
Oh, wow.
Naomi Kennedy. This guy, I like his hair.
Correct.
You see the Henry Hudson Bridge to the left of the cowboy? I don't know if he's a cowboy. Looks like a cowboy hat. 1938, still in the Depression-era work gangs began improvements in the park. Trails are blazed and widened, and near-century-old homes are destroyed in an effort to return the park to nature. So that might be a familiar path to some of you. You can see the outline of the Henry Hudson Bridge to the upper left. Kind of a before and after. Same path. They've held up well. 1938, the tulip tree, famous for so long, dies. It had been dying for a while. When they cut it down, counting the rigs, they counted that it was 280 years old. It was just the tree was just it was rotting, and I think a hurricane swept through and just did irreparable damage to it. More photos from 1938. See, those are the same photos. December 26, 1938. Plans and bids on construction of a pedestrian bridge over the New York Central Railroad tracks in Inwood Hill Park by the Henry Hudson Parkway Authority. I've walked across that. Upper roadbed is attached, 1938. Doubling their capacity. Oh, and this one you can definitely see the Indian Road Cafe. And it looks like the building is still under construction. But we are sitting right there right now. And there's some Archaeological gardens people up in here. Uh-oh. Ah, I know. Oh, yeah. But there's Archaeological gardens up there. And that's George Washington High School.
Trees are turning into road.
Yeah.
For a while, there was talk about a yacht basin over by the island over there. It never got off the ground. But there was going to be a parking lot for the yachtsmen and a clubhouse for the yachtsmen, and not much for everybody else. Okay, so in this photo, somebody in a canoe here, and there's a kid in an inner tube.
Oh, yeah. Ferris Beach.
Yeah, I think this is something they used to call Bare Ass Beach. You can still just climb down, scramble down the hill and get to it. It's near the railroad tracks. This is a nice photo. It's starting to become the park we know today. Now this is a concrete structure there that I understand was taken down because crime was being committed behind it. It became dangerous. A place people couldn't see. But the tennis courts. Bleachers?
Behind that back ball.
So there's a baseball diamond there. And
Okay. That makes sense. Oh, there's where the sea would be today. In 1948, the Parks Department for the first time opens Inwood Hill Park to bicycles and roller skates. Do you recognize somebody in the photo? Who do you see?
so the little girl, and maybe those are her siblings, I'm not sure. Her name was Una Gavin, and the Gavin family lived in one of those private houses on Park Terrace West that goes down the hill. They used to house the brothers and the.
Oh, okay. She used to live at Park Terrace West, they say, one of the houses. One of the private houses. Oh, this is similar to Betty's shot from earlier. And what gets me is just how clean it looks, because the trees are so tiny. It looks like a toy train set or something. And this photograph was shot from, I think, the rooftop of 260 or 270 Seaman Avenue. It was one of the supers like to take photographs, and his I think granddaughter got me the photos. This is a football match at Inwood Hill Park, 1950. This is Herb Maruska. He died recently. He lived in the neighborhood for years, moved down to Orlando. We call him Orlando Herb. He sent me these photos. So that's his mother, and that's Herb. And that's his little brother Roland. And this woman, I can't remember her name. They were German. They were German Americans, and they were put in an internment camp in Texas during the war. This was a German friend here, and this was a Filipino woman. Her name was Faye Palanfax. And Herb wrote to me that Faye and her family during the war, walking around the neighborhood, would wear signs saying, "We are not Japanese," just to avoid any misunderstandings. But I think Herb and his family understood. This is Dolores, and it was her grandfather who was the super that shot the photo earlier. Anyway, this is her and her dog Queenie. And it was her park, and the Sea Rock with those seas behind her. These are the Murphys. These are relatives of Joe Dickensian, who lives about a block away. And the Murphys are not really Murphys at all. They're not Irish. They're Polish. But it was easier to get a job as a Murphy. So these are the Murphys. They're great, aren't they? These are Joe's uncles, Joe and Johnny Murphy, and this is a gag shot. They're pretending to drink, out of Rheingold cans, Rheingold beer, and the Sea Rock, if you look at the upper right, is just starting to be painted. And this is a photo from Bob Unger. He lived over at Seaman Avenue. He also passed away recently. He gave me this photo, and this is his brother. And this is Bare Ass Beach, the beach we were talking about earlier. And, his brother's caught a fish, apparently. This must have been a popular spot. Because when I put a call, Don and I wrote a book recently on the history of the neighborhood called Lost Inwood, just like the talk. And when I put out a call for photographs, I got a lot of this little beach. This is over the Dykeman end of the Inwood Hill Park. This is Joe's aunt, and that's I think is that 207th or is that Isham Street? 207th. These are from the Yanico family, and Joe's shack was there from the 1950s through 1988, and it was a concession stand. And they sold, sodas, candy, and outfits that you had to a concession stand. But I got to tell you, having done these history talks and doing the website, this is something that people are very, very nostalgic about. The Miramar pool, there's a few things that really push people's buttons, but Joe's shack seems to be one of them. So he and the rest of the family, they must have been characters. 1954, the American Legion puts the plaque over by the Gaelic Field that most of us are familiar with. We call it Shirakapak Rock. It's a brass plaque. We know that at least once the rock has been vandalized. The sign has been stolen and replaced. Here's another one. When we were working on the book, we got a whole series of shots from different people where the sea is getting a little bit bigger and a little bit bigger. So it seems to us that it was painted over the course of several years. And this is around the Manhattan Speed Race in 1954. 1962, right out the window. There's the Nature Center in the background. 1966 through 1973, lamp posts during the Lindsay administration are put all through this park and other parks through the city, so people can take nice midnight strolls in the parks that I'm imagining are totally safe in the early 1970s. And they're immediately vandalized. And the little stumps are now called Lindsay lights. And the city enters a period of neglect. This is a Herb Maruska photo. The Shirakapak sign has been stolen. And this boulder's been vandalized. The scene gets so bad that National Guardsmen are called and deployed at Inwood Hill Park, 100 of them. Sounds like a good thing, right? But that gets a little out of control, too. National Guardsmen are ordered to leave the neighborhood after protests. Residents claim that heavy construction equipment is destroying the park's fragile ecology. Penny, are you quoted her? You're quoted somewhere. 1972. Comic writer Chris Claremont, and he lived at 10 Park Terrace East, that building near the traffic circle. Claremont, who made a cameo in X-Men Days of Future Past, and sometimes incorporated Inwood to his work. And a 1972 comic titled Night of the Dragon, an epic showdown plays out in Inwood Hill Park, where, amidst the gentle trees overlooking the Hudson River, Iron Fist and the powerful Seal Serpent wage a savage fight for survival. Meanwhile, across the river and 100-odd blocks uptown, there is the Gab. It got away from me on the parkway. With no tall buildings up here, it's almost impossible to swing. Steel Serpent said he'd be waiting for me on the bluff overlooking the Hudson River Parkway, the river. Away from the casual onlookers. This park has a nice feel to it. Not at all like Central Park, so long as you ignore the beer cans and broken bottles.
Yes, I think he'd been up there.
Yeah, he'd been up there.
I think he invented the X-Men, the new X-Men.
This is a Herb Maruska classic. It's still a little hard to make out, but we've got graffiti that says "Kiss" and "Disco sucks." 1992, legislation was introduced by Councilmember Stanley Richards to name the natural areas of the park Shirakapak. in honor of the Lenape.
Not Stanley Richards, Stanley Michaels.
Stanley Michaels. Did I just say Stanley Richards? I don't know where that came from. My apologies. Stanley Michaels, Stanley Michaels, Stanley Michaels. Okay. 1995, the Inwood Hill Urban Ecology Center opens. And I wish they would reopen this. That's kind of inexcusable. For those who don't know, it was taken offline during the hurricane. What? How many years ago was that? 5, 6 years ago?
No, it never went back to 2012.
2012. And so it got flooded. So there's got to be all kinds of water damage and mold, but there's no reason you couldn't whip this into shape. 2002, and this was about when I moved to the neighborhood, and I thought this was so cool. They reintroduced bald eagles to the park, and it was a successful program.
Saw one a month ago.
They didn't stay.
Do you know how many there are now?
I have no idea how it's worked out for them.
I saw one yesterday. You saw one yesterday?
Wow, somebody said they saw one yesterday.
I saw one a month ago.
2010. For people who've been in the neighborhood for a while, they'll remember right next door to us, right behind me, was a place called Scavengers, which I used to love. They closed in 2010. It's hard to believe it's been that long.
Wow.
2012, which we mentioned a minute ago, Hurricane Sandy knocks down trees and floods the Inwood Hill Urban Ecology Center. Years later, the facility remains a ruin. I think they've cleaned it up a little bit since this photo, but not much. This was kind of neat. Columbia had a deal with the city, I think, for occupying property that they really shouldn't have been on for about a century. This was a concession. They built a park for the community, right outside the window. And it's called the Muscota Marsh Park. And a harbor seal, has been showing up every couple of years. There's been 2 of them now.
Is there a season that you can do?
In the summertime, the warmer months, and you want to come during whatever the high tide is, because otherwise it's just a mud flat.
Right.
This is some scenes from today. Drums along the Hudson. We've traveled a great distance. And that's all. Thank you very much. We will see you next